Hey guys, what is going on? It is finally here, the first test between the British and Irish Lions and the Wallabies in Vegas this weekend. I gotta tell you, the tour has been very underwhelming so far. Yes, some great crowds in Australia. Yes, the Waratahs showed up to a certain extent, but otherwise it's just been absolutely one-way traffic. You think about some of the great Lions tours in the past. I think of 2005, the Maori All Blacks getting the win over the Lions. Just little results like that were kind of a spanner in the works. So far, it's just been a predictable processional of quality from the Lions. Yes, they really had a rough outing to start off against Argentina going down, but otherwise it's been smooth sailing for them. Absolutely minimal resistance from the Aussie super squads. But finally, the first test is here. And I'm going to be rooting for the Wallabies. This is just unprecedented territory for me as an All Blacks fan, but I am worried for them. Looking at these team lineups, which we're going to go through in this video today. Let's start with the Aussies at home. I'm concerned, but we're going to take a bit of a glass half full approach. We're going to look at what the highlights are in this Aussie team and maybe think of ways that they can get a famous win over the Lions. Starting in the front row, James Slipper, Allen, Alatoa, very experienced props there. Tani Alatupo not going to be available till Melbourne next week. Matty Fesler's in there too. So, pretty solid front row. That continues with Nick Frost, who's been one of the real workhorses of Australian rugby throughout Super Rugby. Williams is a capable locking partner, perhaps not on the level of Frost. Frost has just been a kind of head down, bum up kind of guy, work rate through the roof. Really, a shining light in Aussie rugby. But the biggest loss for me is at number 6, Rob Valetini, who might just be the best Aussie forward running around this year. He's crocked. He's out. Should be back next week. But that pushes a youngster into the spotlight here. Nick Champion de Crepigny. This is his first game. That is tough. I mean, look, it happens sometimes, and pressure does create diamonds. Perhaps this young man will shine, but I do think the Aussies are going to miss that ball carrying from Valetini. He can just cart the ball up so well, create that impact, dent the advantage line. But let's not mourn the loss of him from the starting team this week. Let's just say it's a great opportunity for this young man at 6. Now, one of the shining lights is definitely the 7 and 8 there for Australia. Thank God Harry Wilson is okay captaining the team. I think so much of the ball carrying is going to fall on his shoulders. He is going to have to really put this team on his back, but he'll be ably supported by Fraser McWright, one of the best number 7s running around. Good turnover merchant, work rate through the roof. If these guys at 7 and 8 can really create a battle at the breakdown, that's going to give the Aussies some hope. They have to just pour everything into the breakdown. They cannot get eaten alive there. They're going to actually want to play some unstructured rugby, some counter-attacking rugby. I think that's their best bet. If it becomes sort of a case of plodding from set piece to set piece, the Lions should have them there. But if it opens up a bit more as a contest, the Aussies can be in this. And I'll elaborate more on why that is when we look at the outside backs, because that's the real shining light of this Aussie team. Unfortunately, I'm not loving what I'm seeing from 9 and 10. Yes, Jake Gordon has been terrific for the Waratahs. I've praised him a lot of times on this channel. But because of that unfortunate injury to Noah Lolesio, who, to my eyes, was the best number 10 running around for Australia, even if he's going offshore, you simply had to pick him on form. Well, he got injured against the Fijians in the warm-up fixture, not going to be available. That is a crushing blow to Australia. Youngster Tom Lynagh comes in, and this was a guy who wasn't even starting every week for his super franchise. So that worries me just a bit. It also concerns me from a chemistry perspective that you have Tate McDermott on the bench. I almost think you want McDermott starting at 9 to reactivate that Reds combination with Lynagh. At least they have a lot of reps on the field together this year. I just wonder about the Gordon-Lynagh combination. Not only is Lynagh short on experience, but those two blokes are short on minutes together as a duo. And you just need that halves pairing. Now, admittedly, the Lions, they're betting in new combinations. But, this is where all of those games against the Super Rugby franchises have helped the Lions find their footing. Sure, they've rotated through their squad, but there are combinations developing, even with players who normally, would never be out there together because they're from the 4 different home nations. But I worry about that. Now, Tate McDermott is probably the best impact player coming off the bench in terms of scrum halves in Australia. His sniping is excellent. He's got that great running game, great support lines, can definitely pick a hole around a ruck and dart through it. So, I do think there's value having him come off the bench. Again, it's just a chemistry and time together in the saddle thing. I worry very much about this halves pairing for Australia. But let's go a bit more glass half full. If you now go numbers 11 to 15, tons of X factor, tons of speed. Harry Potter, brilliant for the Force. Jorgensen has definitely been a revelation for Australian rugby. Burst onto the scene as a schoolboy, is backing that up. His defense is improving, but one thing that's never been missing is just pace, finishing ability. He's got that in spades. And then you look at 12 and 13, a genuine world-class X-factor duo there. Len Ikitau, brilliant midfielder, and Joseph Suali'i, NRL convert, obviously, has played quite a few minutes at 15 in Super Rugby, but I think it's good having him there at 13 because Tom Wright is the best Aussie fullback running around. So Suali'i showed against England last year up at Twickenham when the Aussies did get that famous scalp. He just has an X factor and an aerial ability. He gives the Aussies an opportunity to attack in the air. He's got those AFL skills. So he'll be chasing bombs all day when the Aussies decide to put boot to ball. But in general, I think you're going to want to see this backline running the ball back. Maybe not from their own 22, but certainly from within their own half. This is the kind of only area where I think the Aussies might have an edge in terms of speed, combinations, and perhaps just making incisions with the ball in hand. A couple of guys are going to be pretty important coming off the bench. Angus Bell, one of the most mobile props in world rugby. You want to see him punching some holes in that gain line when he comes off the bench. Carlo Tizzano also I look at as, to me, if not Fraser McWright, the standout number 7 for the Aussies in Super Rugby, brilliant for the Force. So he can certainly make an impact when he comes on. You want to see a kind of Quagga Smith type cameo where he can come on and create some havoc at the breakdown. Otherwise, though, I think that they're missing a killer midfielder here. Ben Donaldson, okay, he's a backup at 10. I'm not overwhelmed by this guy's game. I don't necessarily think he has the skill set to pick apart a defense as good as the Lions. Then you have Andrew Callaway, who is versatile. He can play in midfield at a pinch, but he's much more of a winger fullback. I just almost want another wrecking ball on the bench there who can be inserted into the midfield. But it seems that Ikitau and Joseph Suali'i are going to have to play 80 minutes out there. So, yeah, a little bit of punch missing in terms of having another midfielder waiting on the bench. That would be my critique of this Aussie squad. But let's take a look at their opposition now, the Lions. I just spoke about Angus Bell being a mobile ball carrier. Alice Genge for England has just been running like a midfielder, made so many post-contact meters. Sheehan's a try-scoring machine and good in the set piece. Very well-rounded player there for Ireland. And, of course, Furlong, so capped, so experienced, gnarly player. Good thing Slipper and Alatoa are out there because you need experience in the Aussie front row to counteract a veteran like that. Moving on, obviously, Itoje is lethal in the air. Occasionally has a tendency to decline as the game goes on. I'm not really questioning his cardiovascular conditioning. I'm not sure what it is, but he's often more impactful in the first half. Going to need an 80-minute stint from the captain. And then you have Joe McCarthy, just a big old monster there to partner him at lock. And, of course, you go to Byrne at 6, and now we have really 3 viable line-out options. So I think the Lions are going to want to pick apart the Aussies in the air. I do think they have the edge in the line-out. And, frankly, based on this forward pack, I think they have the edge at the scrum as well. An interesting one for me was the choice of Curry. I really rate this guy. Also rate his brother, Ben Curry. This is Tom Curry, of course, who plays for England. He is fantastic around the field, good at the breakdown. And, I mentioned the Aussies are going to want to turn over some pill and play some unstructured rugby. Curry's job is going to be sealing up any holes in the ruck. He's going to need to be at his absolute best, flying around the paddock. His work rate's going to need to be through the roof, because if the Lions can make sure of that area of the game, because I think they've got the set piece covered, but if they can also dominate at the breakdown, it could really be lights out for the Aussies. Interesting having Conan there at 8. My personal choice would be Ben Earl. I do think he's the best number 8 running around the UK or Europe for that matter, but can't really complain about that choice either. If we move on to the backs, Jameson Gibson-Park is okay. There were some worries that he was injured early on. He's clearly bounced back from that. He is the first choice number 9, so that's a big win for the Lions having him available. And then Finn Russell, just sheer X factor. It's great seeing him pulling the strings with a world-class bunch of players around him. Scotland normally are a little sporadic. Yes, they have a handful of X factor players, but not typically 1 through 23. It's been great seeing Finn Russell flourish with all that quality around him. And then we keep the Scottish theme going. Tuipulotu, Hugh Jones, big destructive midfield combination. Good to see some Scottish representation out there. It's not just an English-Irish fest. The back 3 is kind of fascinating to me. Big boots all around. Lowe has a prodigious kick. Keenan really is like an AFL player. The length, the height he gets on the ball, it does somewhat signal a tendency to kick here. They're going to have to be accurate with their kick chase all day, because you are inviting danger by kicking to the Aussie back 3 a lot. I mentioned that is one of the shining lights for the Aussies, the outside backs. Handing over possession to the Aussies could be a mistake. I'm actually anticipating more kicking for territory, angled kicks, plugging the ball into the 22 and sending it out into touch. Pick off the Aussies at the line out. That's kind of what I'm thinking here by having such big kickers there in the back 3. Not that these guys are slouches when it comes to running rugby, but you would say the Aussie back 3 is maybe a little bit more exciting on attack, whereas these guys, I think, would have the edge in a kicking duel. And look, what it's really going to come down to is depth. Okay, so we move on to the replacements here. Kelleher, Porter Stewart, grizzled veterans. Chessum, Earl, that man I mentioned, this is real impact coming off the bench. And then the outside back. So Mitchell, one of the best halfbacks running around these days, he will come on. He will keep things moving. He will be able to up the tempo, I believe, at about the 60-minute mark. Marcus Smith, clearly not a starter in this squad, but can provide genuine impact off the bench, whether he's coming on at 10 or 15. But where I kind of give the edge to these Lions in terms of the back replacements is just having that brute in midfield. I was lamenting that the Aussies don't really have that. Well, you have it here. It's Bundy Aki. Clearly he's a 12, but can play 13, can play wing at a pinch, but just a big destructive unit. You have to think he'll be making some heavy yards towards the end of this game. I think the Aussies are just missing a monster midfield option on the bench, but the Lions have it here, and hey, isn't that the benefit of having 4 nations to draw on? So when I look at these two teams, I want to be enthusiastic and optimistic for Australia. I'm going to say never. It is really hard for me to go against the Lions. I just think they've got their set piece firing on all cylinders at the moment, and admittedly, the Aussie-New Zealand 15 had no real time together. But you expected that they might trouble the Lions a bit on attack. They really didn't. The Lions' defense has just gotten better and better after a very patchy opening game against Argentina. So, oh boy, I think that they're going to be able to shut out the Aussies. I think the biggest risk for the Lions is if this does get too helter-skelter and unstructured. If the Aussies play a blinder, counter-attack, they could cause the Lions some grief here. But I tend to think the Lions are going to control this game in Brisbane and come away with a win, perhaps by 10 or 12 points. But what do you guys think? How's the first game going to go down? Any predictions? Anything you would have changed in the Aussie team? Let me know in the comments. Meanwhile, please like, subscribe, send this video to someone who loves rugby, and I'll be back over the weekend to break this game down, as well as the All Blacks France game. Can't wait. Huge weekend for rugby. Let's go. Catch you guys soon. Bye for now.